the moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Mike Mjolnir Evans. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Episode 3 of our 5-bucket trilogy. We're almost.
How come we didn't do five bucket?
We
Could keep going, but I think after a while we'd be straight. And not everything is a 5-bucket.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
a very exclusive club.
It should be. It should be an exclusive
Yes,
club.
Correct.
It needs to have a sheen of excellence around it.
Yes, and I think we agreed that we didn't. All three of us need to be completely on the same page, but as long as 2.5 of us are.
Yes. If 2 of us totally are convinced that it's 5-bucket, and at least a third one can see why we would think so, then I think that
You got to sell. You got to do the hard sell. There you go.
So for this episode, we are returning to the initial Star Wars trilogy.
The original.
The original. So the second installment of that original trilogy, but the 5th overall, The Empire Strikes Back.
Yes. So we had spoken about Star Wars earlier, and this was 3 years later. We had to wait 3 years, kids,
Yeah.
for this movie to come out. And boy, there was very little in between. I remember 2 specific images leading into one of them, Starlog magazine, that we spoke about in the previous episode. It was the cover with the black hole on it, by the way. And there was a picture of the snowtroopers with the big Gatling gun on the ground. And I remember just being kind of like, what the heck is going on? But more importantly was a newspaper picture of Luke Skywalker riding on his Tauntaun.
Oh.
And that was like, now back in the day, they also had a Star Wars newspaper comic strip that I used to beg the librarian to be able to cut that out. And I collected them. I have tons of them. But I have that clipping somewhere of that Luke Skywalker, that picture of him riding on his Tauntaun. And that was like one of the first official images I remember.
Now, when did they announce that a sequel was to be made for Star Wars?
It probably was around the time, like 78, once that hit the ground running and they reissued it and went back to the extent, like you said before in the previous episode, that the initial showing of Star Wars did not have any kind of episode title attached to it. The opening scroll just starts. And then I think it was the 78 reissue is where they went back and gave it the episode 4 title as well as A New Hope. So now you're off and running. So now you can go episode 5.
So now you know that there's other episodes out there that are coming.
Right, the relief we all felt.
Well, I mean, listen, if that was a one and done movie,
I wonder if there was some of us out there wishing that the sequel was not going to star B. Arthur and Harvey Korman.
I did want Lumpy and Itchy, by the way. Itchy was a grandfather, by the way. We had this discussion the other day, and I couldn't remember his name.
As Jeff said, jump ahead 3 years from Star Wars. 1980 was the release year for Empire Strikes Back. So I was prime candidate for this movie. I was 9 years old when it came out, completely invested. Now I had gone back and done my due diligence and was very familiar with the Star Wars story from not only the comics, but I think that there was a radio broadcast.
Yes, the NPR. NPR actually had a live radio broadcast of, and that's where some of the actors came back and played the roles that they originated in the theater and in the movie. And then
Anthony
there was other
Daniels,
actors.
I remember being a part of it.
Anthony Daniels, Mark Hamill. I'm trying to remember. There was, you're making me draw a blank because there's a famous actor that actually played Han Solo. we'll have to leave that.
So yeah, so all these things were gearing up towards the release of the second film. And as we said in the Star Wars episode, the toys didn't come out until really in any concentrated effort until 1978. But once they did, the floodgates opened with Star Wars merchandise.
Yeah, and then it was nonstop. It was
for years that was the number one toy, year after year after year. So you were primed for The Empire Strikes Back when it was finally announced what the title was and what the release date was. And I don't remember being aware of it as a title until shortly before it came out. So I think that they were able to keep a lid on this. I had no idea that the plot twist was coming at the end.
Half the actors didn't. David Prowse, who played Darth Vader, didn't know.
Yeah.
His read somewhere that was something completely different.
I read somewhere that Harrison Ford didn't know until he saw the movie.
He saw the movie, and he turns to Mark Hamill, and he's like, "You know that kid?" Or he just something to that effect.
So what we're talking about, obviously, spoiler alert.
This is a big spoiler.
Yeah, this was the iconic spoiler of all time, that Darth Vader reveals that he is Luke Skywalker's father after you've learned in Star Wars that his father was killed by Darth Vader.
It's not true. That's impossible.
Which makes you rethink everything Obi-Wan told him, because Obi-Wan was just lying.
But I actually read today that initially in the first script that wasn't the case, that they weren't initially going to have Darth Vader be his father. That it was just going to be set up that he murdered his father.
Well, that's right. That's the way that Obi-Wan tells the story.
Right. But as you said, going
from
back,
a certain point of view. So you got a little leeway in there.
But it still plays when you watch Star Wars, that it makes sense.
Oh, because it was. And I think even in the prequels, they did a good job of showing off. That was a scene that I think existed in one of the novels where Obi-Wan explains that they were in a lightsaber battle on a lava planet. And so that was always kind of this image in the background. And I think at one point there existed paintings of the Emperor's Lair, which was on a lava planet.
And that may have been in the novelization by Alan Dean Foster, because I remember reading that myself, that's where he became the beginnings of Darth Vader.
Right.
Was on this planet. But that reveal was flabbergasting at the time as a Star Wars fan. It didn't even compute almost when hearing it.
Correct.
Your reaction was very much the same as Luke's. Like, that's impossible. How can that be?
True. I will tell you that, again, I didn't go to the movies a lot, but a very iconic moment in my life. My parents were divorced. My father had remarried. And unbeknownst to me, it was coming to an end. And the whole family was in Florida, and my dad took my brother and I for the week, and we went camping or whatever, and we ended our trip with seeing this movie. And of course, my dad was absolutely taken back by Yoda. He thought he was the greatest thing in the world. But I had the Marvel comic adaptation leading into this, so I had already read the story going into the movie, but they did not give you the reveal in the comic.
Now let's talk about this. Did they incorporate The Empire Strikes Back into the long-running Star Wars series, or no?
They
was
did.
it a separate adaptation?
It was incorporated.
It was. So they managed to pull that plot into into Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah.
Wow. But I remember seeing this for the first time in Pennsylvania. We went to go visit my aunt, and in Harrisburg. And we went to my father took me to the local theater there in Pennsylvania, and I had my May the Force Be With You t-shirt on. And I remember the usher pointing out my t-shirt, and we were going in late, just like you, Jeff. I missed the opening crawl.
Oh no.
And we came in during the Hoth, the very beginnings of the Hoth sequence. So I didn't miss much, but I was just so pleased that the usher acknowledged my t-shirt.
So your shirt.
I felt validated in some way.
I'm pretty sure that everybody had one.
My part of the movie industry, recognized my t-shirt.
There you go.
So, and I was just blown away by it. And I remember going to tell my entire Pennsylvania side of the family about the movie in detail.
In detail, there you go. Yep, that's a sign of a true good movie when you come back and you just can't stop talking about it. It's like, and then this happened, and then Han Solo does this, and then.
I can't say the same for Star Wars, but I saw Empire repeatedly in the theater when I got back home.
Yeah. So
over and over again.
That was it. So, but it ends on a sour note. It's not a happy ending whatsoever. It's actually
Yeah,
Like you look at Infinity Wars, and Infinity Wars is basically
it's really leave them wanting more. That's what.
because you're like, wait, that's it? What? Yeah.
So, Mike, what was your first experience with Empire?
My first experience was I was nervous, because I had so much invested in Star Wars that you're like, it's never going to live up to it. And, you jump into the movie and it's, with the battle on Hoth, and it's like, okay, good. All right, we're like right into this, thick of the thing. And then it just kind of takes off from there. So I was literally just had great anxiety about it that was like immediately relieved.
Empire grabs hold of you and just does not stop. It really is just from one sequence to another, to another, to another. Very little time to stop and take a breather even.
Yeah. Well, let's say that Lucas did not direct this.
Correct.
He brought in Irving Kirchner.
A former teacher of his at the USC School of Cinematic Arts. I feel like James Mason saying that.
There you go. Arts. It has a little more serious edge to it. Although there is definitely moments of comedy.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
And like I said, the ending is it's such a cliffhanger. Han Solo's taken, he's frozen, and now Boba Fett. And let's talk about Boba Fett, who, again, we laugh about that holiday special, but we were teased with him and in that cartoon leading into this into this movie. And
Boba Fett actually had an action figure before Empire Strikes Back was released. I think Christmas '79, I think, is when I first. It was
a mail away.
The Boba Fett action figure.
And there's another one that's worth $1 billion if you can find it with the most bootlegged action figure, because the little rocket was supposed to fire, and then right around that time there was an issue with the Battlestar Galactica ships shooting the little bullets, and they were choking. There was no choking hazard warning on any of these things.
A buddy of mine had those Battlestar.
I had them as well. Yep, I did. And we used to fire them. The little red rockets, they go everywhere.
Yeah.
So nobody cared back then. They decided, we're going to release this, but the rocket's going to be glued in. So, but supposedly, if you have one of the rare prototypes or whatever, it's like a $20,000 figure.
But I remember this was the glued version of Boba Fett when he came out on the Star Wars action figure.
Oh, on the card, yeah.
But they somehow had a live action photo of him on the card. So it was obviously probably they were filming Empire at that point and probably had a production photo or something. But the first appearance, not counting the holiday special of Boba Fett, such a cool, iconic looking character.
Oh, absolutely.
He doesn't do much in Empire.
No, and that's cool. That's what you wanted. That was the allure of him, was you didn't know who he was. What does he look like underneath that helmet? He's better off to me dead.
Yeah. And how exactly did he know to hang out in the garbage, and
I was waiting. I was kind of waiting for that, a little bit of a tie-in with Solo, because obviously there's a history of these characters.
It would have been great if they just showed him scavenging garbage and then, realizing the Millennium Falcon is right there, just maybe as an accident happens upon them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the tit for tat with Solo and Leia is so well realized, as Cheers, Ted Danson and Shelley Long.
Yeah, and every time he addresses her as Your Highness.
Well, he's constantly calling
worship.
Her and 3PO is just an annoying. So,
but this movie brings these characters to their fruition. Just hinted at almost in the original Star Wars, and you really get more of what you want to see in The Empire Strikes Back. And I think part of the problem with Jedi is maybe overkill. That's kind of the decline of the characters. I think they all reach their apex in Empire.
Well, so we can talk a little bit about Jedi, which was Steven Spielberg was set to direct that. And after the first movie, Lucas was fined because he put all of his credits at the end of the movie. There are no credits at the beginning of this movie. And the Directors Guild fined him like something ridiculous, like $20,000 or whatever. So he quit the guild out of spite. He's like, I'm making my movie my way, and you're not going to tell me how to do it. So when he went to go use Spielberg, they're like, no, you can't use him because he's still in the guild, and we're not going to let you use him. So imagine what Return of the Jedi would have been if Spielberg had been attached. The characters may not have been quite so wooden. But you're right. You're right. They reached their pinnacle.
Mike is talking about how being nervous at the beginning of Empire, and I wasn't exactly nervous at the beginning of Jedi, but I think I was a little let down by Jedi after.
Yeah, I think everyone was.
Yeah.
I remember walking out of there being enjoy. I don't know. Again, it's just, seeing these characters. But again, I didn't care for, like, I couldn't by that time, by Jedi, I didn't relate to Luke Skywalker. He was no longer that kid that longed to get off the planet, and now he's like this seasoned Jedi.
Yeah, I want to talk about this because Star Wars and Empire, 3 years transpired between the two movies. At the end of Star Wars, the rebels obviously have to vamoose off that base.
Right.
The Empire knows where they are. So they go. So they eventually make it to Hoth, where we pick up on them. But apparently Luke has become quite a hotshot fighter pilot for the rebels during that time. He's not training as a Jedi. So he's still kind of the Luke that we know from Star Wars.
Right.
In Empire Strikes Back. Kind of like still the cocky kid who doesn't really know what he's doing. He's kind of flying by the seat of his pants. When we see him in Jedi, suddenly he's like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings.
You shall not pass!
And being off the sun planet, his hair is now dark. It's not blonde anymore, and it's just...
So how much time transpires between Empire and Jedi is my question.
I'm gonna guess not much. I mean, at the end of Empire, you've got Lando and Chewie going after Han.
Yeah.
How long did he hang there? I mean, how long would it really take to infiltrate Jabba's palace? And
I don't want to turn this into a discussion of Jedi, but it just seems like not a lot of time went by between Empire and Jedi.
No, but you did get the sense that he went back to Dagobah.
But you find out that he didn't, because he returns to Dagobah in Jedi to finish his training. So I don't think there's anything goes on between him and Yoda. I could be wrong. I don't know.
I don't know. But let's talk about Yoda, because he's such a realized character, and that's a huge gamble to put a Muppet as one of your, a central character that needs to be believed. CG didn't exist at a point where you could make that character as a CG character. And we all saw in episode 1 how horrible he was realized once he's no longer a Muppet.
He's not a physical presence on screen.
Right, yeah. And Frank Oz just breathes life into this thing. And
now, as a kid, I do have to say that the first words that Yoda speaks, I was hearing Grover when I first saw
I'm not afraid. You will be. You will be.
But yes, I was a little dubious when Yoda appeared in Speaks, but I totally got caught up in it.
You buy him as a character. And Mark, say what you will, Mark Hamill sells it as well. He treats him like an actor.
Yeah. And again, some of the best in training scenes in a film ever.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
All that's missing is Eye of the Tiger, I think, in some of those.
No, do you ever hear the Weird Al version of Lola? Yoda,
yes.
Yo.
And the
lift a rock, just
the American Pie, his American Pie.
Oh, that's
of episode
prequel.
1. Yeah,
prequels.
So, but let's talk about the cave sequence on Dagobah when Luke goes into the cave and confronts Darth Vader.
That just happens to exist on Dagobah, and he tells Luke's been training, and then he senses it, and he's like, "What's in there?" And he says, "Only what you take with you." And of course, he takes his lightsaber, and he's like, need that, you do not. And he's like, nah, I'm going to take this with me. And immediately confronts Vader, chops his head off, and explodes, and he sees himself.
Foreshadowing. So in that image, I think is right from the cover of Splinter of the Mind's Eye. That reminds me of that iconic cover of Luke crouching and Vader approaching him. I think
they're in the planet Mimba, which is like a jungle planet. So you've got the vines and all that stuff around them as well. Like a broken down temple. Yeah.
Always a creepy scene for a kid, to watch that one with the.
It is, and even I was fascinated to the point. I'd buy any of these books, the making of, the behind the scenes, and this whole Dagobah existed. They built it in, I think it was Pinewood Studios in the UK, and just full swamp. You've got the snakes everywhere, which was just pretty cool.
And the sea monster that chomps down on R2.
Chomps down on R2. Yeah. And R2 is a much more realized character in this as well.
Yes,
he's got some comedic moments, and he's, the little fight with Yoda.
Saves the day numerous times as well.
R2 saves the day all the time. Yeah, that's the Yoda stuff is just phenomenal.
And of course, we have Lando, as we mentioned before.
Yep.
Billy
How
D.
you
Williams
doing, Chewbacca?
with his complete charm going as soon as he sees Princess
suave.
Leia.
He is laying it on
like,
thick.
Hello, what have we here? You look absolutely beautiful. You truly belong here with us among the clouds.
Thank you.
And we're getting him back, right?
I think
Yeah.
we are, yeah.
We are.
Effect, yeah. The asteroid belt chase, which is great.
Which is great. That is such a phenomenal.
Yeah.
And that music, I mean, just, and then again, we talk about some of the special effects and all practical ships blowing up or whatever. And there is a scene where one of the TIE fighters hits an asteroid, it blows up, and you get the little pilot comes out, and then he hits an asteroid and blows up.
But and also the great thing about Empire is that it has all these iconic moments in it, really like the Avengers does, where they really tried to pack into the Avengers, like, oh, I wonder what would happen if Thor fought the Hulk. Well, you get it in the Avengers.
Right.
You have all these little iconic moments, and you see some of that in Empire, where I wonder what would happen if Han Solo had the lightsaber. And, well, he does in a little scene in Empire Strikes Back.
That's
when
right,
he the Tauntaun.
And I thought that felt bad on the outside.
There's a lot of lightsaber action that you kind of don't really think about much, because I think that last lightsaber battle overshadows everything that comes before it. Luke employs the lightsaber when he blows up the Imperial Walker in that one scene.
Pop open the hatch,
Yeah, so he doesn't hesitate to use that, but I think later on, when he's in his Gandalf mode in
Right.
Jedi.
Well, that was big too, when you never saw him really use the Force. And yet when the Wampa has him in his lair and he's stuck upside down and he's closing his eyes and he uses that to levitate the lightsaber out of the ground into his hand so that he can free himself. You never really saw that in Star Wars.
Which I often try when I try to reach the remote and I can't quite.
Yeah.
I often think of that.
Do you wave your hand when you walk into a grocery store to magically open the door with the Force? Because I do it to this day. And you got to time it just right, otherwise it looks stupid.
now speaking of this Wampa scene, the changes that Lucas made to the special edition of Empire, much more subtle than what he did with Star Wars.
Yes.
I didn't really find fault with what he did with Empire. The only thing I really disliked was him putting the Emperor more front and center in that transmission to Vader.
And a different actor.
A different actor. I preferred the original footage.
It is thy bidding, my master.
There is a great disturbance in the Force. We have a new enemy, Luke Skywalker.
Because they by the time they got to the third movie is when they brought in Ian McDiarmid. Right. So by then they had already filmed this stuff with a different actor. So he had much more bulbous eyes kind of a thing. So they did replace him. So there was continuity.
But the other change is like the full length of the Wampa, which I thought was great. What they did.
Yeah, because you always wanted to see him. You wanted to see
wasn't that. I don't think that was CGI. I think that was a guy in.
No, that was a full guy in a costume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The scene where he turns around, he's eating the Wampa. Yeah. Not the Wampa. He was eating the Tauntaun.
And then you get the great Vista scenes of Cloud City when the.
Well, that's right. They got rid of the walls, which was great. So they get rid of some of those walls and they put the more of the skyline behind it. Very well.
And you also have in this movie a lot of Han Solo, Darth Vader interaction that you don't get anywhere else.
No.
But in this film.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Yep.
So there's a lot to come to Empire for. I think it offers quite a bit.
Yeah, when they're torturing Solo and Chewie, that's pretty heavy stuff. Because
for no other reason but to get some psychic connection with Luke to get him there.
Right.
That's the only reason that they're torturing them.
Empire is a different Empire. Well, you can't have Empire without Star Wars, obviously. Yeah. It's a more realized. I think Jim had mentioned that before. The characters are more realized. They're not cartoon caricatures. They're not straight out of a comic book. They've got motivations and they have more feeling. There's more invested in them, I think it's a better movie, to be honest with you. Yeah. It's a more satisfying movie in the sense that now your characters are in peril. It's not, in Star Wars, you never really felt like they were going to fail. You knew how, felt like it's a fairy tale story. So you kind of knew where it was going. Even as a kid, you never really thought that they were going to lose. And like I said, you compare this to Infinity Wars, which is bad guy wins. Bad guy wins. He gets chops off Luke's hands, reveals to him that he's his dad.
I would say that I prefer Empire to Star Wars, not to begrudge any buckets away from Star Wars, by no means.
Right.
But Empire is more of a ride from beginning to end. Star Wars is as well, but Empire just does not even allow you to breathe.
It really is relentless.
Yeah.
And like you were comparing it to the Avengers. I mean, they went out of their way to actually have Spider-Man make that joke about, hey, guys, you remember that really old movie where the things were walking in the snow? And he's like, how old is this kid? Because that's exactly what they do. They use the rope to take down
Giant Man. Yeah.
So, it's a different movie, but
But let's talk about the iconic fight at the end between Luke and Darth Vader, which I don't think that's ever been bettered in terms of lightsaber battles.
Well, I will say that Mark Hamill was very disappointed because he was training, and there's a stunt double. I don't think David Prowse did a lot of the stunt work on that. And they wanted to do all these neat little twists and spinning around, and Lucas was adamant that these things are so heavy, you wouldn't be able to do that. And then immediately in Phantom Menace,
that's what they're doing.
That's exactly what they wanted to do, And it was like Carrie Fisher felt the same way, which was, you got me in the same damn dress for 3 movies, and then Amidala comes around and she's got to dress on different clothes every time she's on screen. It's like, you couldn't give me some nice dresses or doll me up. So Mark Hamill was actually very kind of disappointed that he was never able to have the lightsaber fight.
Yeah, but compared to the lightsaber battle in Star Wars, it's
absolutely. Night and day. But you also got an old guy fighting his student as he holding back a little bit, such a great, and
very satisfying.
Yes,
Vader is
although I always wondered,
him, and Luke is really getting hammered.
They're in that one room, and Vader's pulling the pipes off the wall, and he's hitting Luke with them, and then Luke finally goes backwards out the window. How does he hold on to his lightsaber? When he goes out the window, I think his hands are empty. Yet in the next scene, he's comes back onto the balcony. He's got the saber again. So I think that's a little gaffe.
It probably
somebody needs to answer for.
Yeah. It's like Indiana Jones' hat rolling back onto the cliff after he goes over. Just magic. That's movie magic right there.
Right. But no, that scene was just edge of your seat stuff, and that's the reason I went back to see Empire again and again. Is
I remember coming out of the theater and the kid getting in the car next to us is like, I finally know who plays Darth Vader. It was James Earl Jones. And I'm like, it took you 3 years to find that out? Stupid kid. Yeah, I mean, do you just believe him? Is he lying to him? So that's, you got 3 years to wait and find out if that's true.
Which is an unbelievable tease. Like
3 years.
It's not like you even have to wait. It's not even you have to wait a TV season. That's the difference between becoming from a teenager to a man. That's like going through puberty. 3 years.
I got 1 more year. I'm out of college.
Yeah.
I forgot that movie.
I'm afraid I won't care when this movie comes out anymore.
Yeah, but we did.
Yes, we did. Probably too much so, but
probably. Yeah. That was back when they still had programs. Remember, you could buy the little program book before you got the movie.
Yeah, they had some merchandise in the lobby. Yeah.
Yeah.
Going down that path, let's talk about merchandising a little bit for Empire.
Oh, Empire was all. I mean, by time, like you said, by the time Empire came about, they were in full swing. Yeah. So any background character, any little thing that you saw was suddenly a ship or as a figure.
Which meant that whenever you went to the Star Wars figure section of your local Caldor or Bradley's or whatever it was, invariably all they had was the Bespin Guard figure. That's
right, the Bespin Guard. Or the Snowtrooper.
Yep, Yoda was never to be found. I don't know how I got Yoda.
With a little orange snake.
With a little orange snake,
gimme stick, and you had the gimme stick.
Luke Skywalker handles his saber well, Ben Kenobi. You should know, Yoda. Yes, I've been the Jedi Master for 800 years.
Yoda and other action figures each sold separately.
Beep, 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 beep. It's okay, R2-D2. I've got my laser pistol. Hold it, Luke. They're afraid of your snake, Yoda. You have nothing to fear. The Force is all around us.
Yoda and other action figures each sold separately. From Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back collection. From Kenner.
That's right. And he was like not even an inch tall, maybe an inch. He was tiny.
He was. Yes. But that was the most coveted figure, I think, of that whole line.
Yeah.
And, I so wanted the Imperial Walker, the full-size Imperial Walker.
Yeah, I never acquired that.
I never did either.
That was out of, I did get the Death Star playset
with,
prior
with
to.
with the trash compactor and the
Yeah, I still got my little Dianogas in there.
Yeah.
The little foam
little
trash.
foam, little foam things
Yep.
that it came with.
Yeah.
But
Millennium
I
Falcon.
loved the Wampa thing. They had a Wampa set.
I have the Wampa, but I found it at like some antique store.
Yeah, me too. I've got a dirty old
Yeah, he's
Wampa.
like yellow, like his arms and his.
Like he's been eating tauntauns for 10 years.
Indiscriminately.
But there was cereal. This really
3POs.
broke into other genres as well of merchandising. But I remember the 3POs.
3POs.
Yeah.
Anthony Daniels even did those commercials.
Yes, he
I don't
did.
think any other person has ever played 3PO.
But yeah, those Empire commercials dominated Saturday morning TV.
Burger King had a huge tie-in with the Burger King glasses.
The glasses,
They had the sticker book, and they had the posters.
Yeah, the glasses were huge for me. I had to have every single one of those glasses. And when you drank a Coke at Burger King for the first time out of one of those glasses, it was
magic.
psychological, unparalleled taste. Unparalleled. To hear that ice clinking against that glass, it was a beautiful memory.
And then you had to wrap it up, make sure you got home all intact. And
yes.
Yeah. And the artwork was cool. The artwork was nice.
Oh, yeah. And I had the Gatefold soundtrack album, I remember, for Empire.
I do. I have that as well. Yep.
Yeah. And nobody remembers this, but Miko had the Star Wars theme out in 77 as a disco hit. Dun, dun, dun,
was that?
But they also came out with the Imperial March, and that also was a hit for Miko.
They had an Imperial March version?
They had an Imperial
Miko?
March. Yeah, I was listening to the 1980 countdown on the 80s channel, Sirius FM, and there in the top.
Did they have like little sound effects from the movie mixed in?
I think it did. It was the Imperial March. That was the basic thrust of
Which
it.
is such an iconic. We didn't even talk about John Williams and his contribution to these movies, because they would not be these movies without this soundtrack. With the score, it elevates what really
just the opening title shot. Ta-da,
right? Yeah, Imperial March is so iconic now.
Yes,
and you forget that wasn't even in Star Wars. That was Jedi. I mean, Empire.
Empire, yeah.
And that whole opening scene, and by then Darth Vader. So you realize that Darth Vader already knows who Luke Skywalker is. He's done his math and he's done his homework and he's figured out.
Well, the name Skywalker should give it away.
Well, you would think, right? He's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, I've heard that name before.
And do you remember the smell of a brand new iron-on transfer?
Oh yeah, like burnt toast.
Yeah, like burnt toast, burnt popcorn, kind of a
plastic.
smell.
I have an iron-on.
Like I remember going into a T-shirt shop and paging through the catalog and picking, I want that transfer, and then like they would, like the press would come down.
I actually have a book somewhere with like 20 of those.
And of course,
iron-ons.
They would only last through maybe 5 washes max.
Yeah, if you over ironed them, they became like stiff as board, and you could actually break them.
Yeah. Only good
and
for
rubbery. You get one little thing, and then you start picking at it, and all of a sudden it's like 3/4.
But it was fitting in a way, because the next year always brought the new movie, and it was never cool to linger on the movie from the previous year.
Oh, now it is. Now they this whole company just feed on nostalgia.
Now it is, yeah.
My son was actually wearing. I had a Return of the Jedi shirt with Vader and Luke on it, and it was in one of my chests, and he wore it for years after I did. 30, 40 years later. So.
I would like to point out a joke in Spaceballs that they make that I often actually wondered myself. At the end of Empire Strikes Back, when R2 saves the day and finally fixes the hyperdrive on the Millennium Falcon, and they kick it and they're gone, and it leaves the Star Destroyer captain just kind of, and Darth Vader just staring at the trails. And then in Spaceballs, it happens, and Rick Moranis' character, Dark Helmet, says, "Why can't we do that?"
Prepare to... What happened? Where are they? I don't know, sir. They must have hyperjets on that thing. And what do we got on this thing? A Cuisinart?
Right.
That was my question as well. Well, don't they have hyperspace too? They
right.
Can just follow them.
I guess you can't chase them in hyperspace. You don't know where they're going.
You don't know where their outcome is. Because at one point, somebody says to Vader, "We've calculated all the they could have gone," or
Or I sat on Cloud City for long enough. They could have just put another tracker on it like they did in the first movie.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I love the unspoken looks between Lando and Lobot.
It was like they were secret lovers or something, right? was like,
Yep,
hey,
gives-
how you doing? How you doing?
The little nod, yeah, to the
Yeah, he didn't have
Lobot.
to say anything. He had like a little control panel on his wrist. He just type a couple of buttons, and Lobot came to life.
And I was reading the history of Lobot. It was actually a lobotomized character that is jacked into the computer system of Cloud City. So Lobot kind of runs Cloud City. Those earmuffs around his ears are the computerized his
Or
jack
wrapped.
to the.
Wow.
So he controls everything going on in Cloud City, and I guess he's sacrificed his humanity to play that role of Lobot. So it's not just a lazy storytelling of just switching the R to L in the word robot. It's short for lobotomized.
Lobotomized. Oh, wow. That's crazy.
But yes, I much prefer Empire to Star Wars.
No,
And
I'll always choose Star Wars.
watching Empire really casts a pall over Return of the Jedi, unfortunately.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it doesn't really know where it's going. It's not a cohesive, because there's a lot of stops and starts. You really do have to show the rescue of Han Solo, but
Right.
that's a whole other movie, and it just stops, and then
And
something else.
the complete and utter dismissal of Boba Fett is just unsatisfying.
Yeah, correct. You never see that character at his full
No.
capacity, I think.
And I think there was a lot of backlash about the Ewoks as well. But
Yes.
at one point, well, originally they were supposed to be Wookiees. And then he decided that they weren't. He had already established that Chewie had abilities with mechanics and whatever, so they weren't quite as native as he originally envisioned. So then he created the Ewoks instead. But without the Ewoks, we wouldn't have had Warwick Davis. So he was like, what, 8 or 9 years old playing Wicket. And he's still acting today, man.
I can just envision, again, looking for the Star Wars action figure, going to the store, hoping to find a Gamorrean guard or something, and then seeing 10 Wickets on the rack.
Poor Wicket. He didn't get his just dues.
So yeah, a classic $5 bucket. You know, if we could go 6, maybe we might even push it
Wow.
there.
Yeah. Oofa.
Any closing thoughts on Empire before we put this one to bed?
I'm drawing a blank. I think that we've hit probably most of. We didn't talk about the space slug, which is such a great reveal when they land inside the asteroid.
Yeah, when they're inside the
What
mountain.
are the bats called? Minoc?
Minoc, yep.
Right.
No, the Minocs were the creatures inside.
Right. You said the bats, yeah.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you try to look. I really would have hoped that maybe even in the reissue, because when you watch the Falcon go into that tunnel, there's no indication whatsoever that they're in anything but a cave.
Right.
You don't
The
see
teeth,
any
yeah.
indication of teeth, or it doesn't. You know, it looks like rock that they're flying past.
Right.
So I would have liked to have seen something that you could
Just
go
something
back
that
to.
gave it away.
Yeah, but no, they
Maybe
don't do
he
that.
was like toothless and he just had his teeth could retract.
Yeah. But yeah, it was cool.
That is
Obviously, a
fun.
hand puppet coming out of there, but
Oh,
that's
sure.
nice.
Yeah.
So, which one are you going to watch again now, Jeff? Is still Back to the Future, or have we sold you on Empire to go watch that again?
I don't know. I might have to still watch Back to the Future. You're making a solid case for Empire.
So, all right, next week we're visiting Glass. We're also going to cover Unbreakable and Split. So the whole, are they calling it the Glass trilogy, the Unbreakable trilogy?
I don't know. Nothing's really been established as far as what Shyamalan is referring to this as. Because this was a bit of a shock. This was actually a bit of a surprise that all of a sudden Glass is a reality. Very excited.
Yeah, and thankfully Split was a big enough hit that this could happen with Glass.
I've never seen it.
Oh, no?
Well, there's your homework right there.
Yes.
Unbreakable,
And
Split,
McAvoy sells this movie. You can't have this movie. If it was anybody else, I don't know. I don't think it would have worked. You realize pretty quickly this guy is pretty versatile.
Although, again, it's just these actors being so buff that, like, you think, how can this character have time to go to the gym and work out?
But I think that's part of the point of the character. He physically transforms when he changes persona. And meanwhile,
Well, that's just
Bruce
a small-
Willis being the strongest character
Yeah.
looks like a doughboy.
Right. A small quibble. But yeah, next week is going to be all about the Shamalama Lama Lama Ding Dong.
I like it. I like it. Do you remember when the first time when he was up for the Academy Award for maybe it was a Golden Globe for Sixth Sense, and they misspelled his name on his name card on the table?
Really? Did they pronounce it correctly at least when they read it off?
I don't remember if he won anything, but I do remember there was a bug hubbub that it was misspelled.
Oh, a good thing they didn't have John Travolta read off his name. All right, with
And
that,
on that note,
let's call it a day.
All right.
Enjoy.
Oh,
Bye.
I don't claim you can have a better time with Colt 45 than without it. But why take chances?